This is the Inner Chief Podcast, episode 347.
I think the danger for CEOs is to allow yourself to be surrounded by people who only want to tell you how good your ideas are, how funny your jokes are, what a great person you are. You actually need the balance of people that will go, you got that right, you got that wrong, you could have handled that in a different way.
This is the Inner Chief Podcast, episode 347. And today we continue our best of series with Mike Schneider, Managing Director of the Bunnings Group, on career diversity, genuine empathy, and the 4 H's of authenticity. I am your host, Greg Layton, founder of Chiefmaker and the Council of Chiefs. I believe there is a great chief in all of us, and that through listening to the stories, strategies, and techniques of great CEOs and gurus, each of you can find and leave your own legacy through your work and life. The Inner Chief Podcast is where you will learn how to think and make moves like a CEO, like a true chief. For over a decade, I've helped CEOs and senior executives around the world boldly lead change, inspire their people, and leave a legacy. On the Inner Chief Podcast, I bring these stories to life with deep diving CEO interviews, interspersed with minisodes covering key leadership challenges, so you will find your own path to greatness as an executive. In this episode, we replay a chat I had with Mike Schneider in 2019. Mike is still the Managing Director of the Bunnings Group and has been since May 2017. He was previously the Managing Director of Bunnings Australia and New Zealand, and prior to this, he led the store operations team, having joined Bunnings way back in 2005. His career has seen him hold a range of senior operational, commercial and human resources roles, both in retail and financial services, most notably at Target, Westpac and the Warehouse Group. Mike holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of New South Wales and has completed the Advanced Management Program at INSEAD and the Advanced Strategic Management Program at IMD. Today, you're going to hear Mike talk all about how having a diverse career path has been to his benefit, why genuine empathy and being a consistent, non-predictable leader has been the key to his success, what he means by an integrated life as opposed to work-life balance, and his 4 H's framework that allowed him to lead an authentic life. So Chiefs, without further ado, let's hear from our best of series guest, Mike Schneider. Okay, I'm here with Mike Schneider, MD of Bunnings here in Australia. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Mike, listen, we don't know that much about you. I'd love to hear a bit about a story that sums up maybe your childhood and early life. What can you tell us about you?
Pretty average. I guess a lot of people might say that. I grew up in Sydney in the suburb of North Ryde, went to a little local primary school, lived at home with mum and dad, went to an all-boys high school and then on to university. But through my childhood, things that really stood out to me were the importance of family, the importance of caring for one another. My dad was very sick during my childhood and suffered from a lot of heart disease. And by the time I was in my late teens, he benefited from someone donating a heart. He had a heart transplant back in the early 1990s. And we saw from that the gift of life and the gift of generosity of spirit that donating organs can do. So that's something that I've always thought really important. And it also was a time where things were pretty tough financially, because when you have parents that are sick and can't work, you're relying on social welfare. So one of the things that's always probably influenced my thinking is the importance of a really good social welfare system, really fair conditions for people to work and really good rates of pay for your team members so that people can live lives in a way where they've got meaning and purpose and the opportunity and the choice to do different things.
How did your career start? Let's talk prior to professional life. What was your first job as a young man?
Actual first job probably was, working for a little bit of cash, mowing lawns in the local neighbourhood, a little bit of warehousing for a family friend. We did a bit of work in a pharmaceutical labs warehouse, moving stock around. And then that moved me on to a retail job. I was working in the stockroom of a toy store in George Street in Sydney. It's called Hobbyco. It's now moved on to Queen Victoria Building. So if you're a hobby enthusiast, you'll know what I'm talking about. But retail probably from a very early stage.
Yeah, right. Excellent. And your first ever car?
First ever car was a very nasty yellow shade, and it was a Datsun 180B.
Oh, the old 180B.
classic car.
An absolute classic. And in fact, I think we've had about 5 CEOs on the show that had a Datsun.
Yep. And I was very envious of a mate of mine. He had a 200B, but apparently that was a 180B with 20 more mistakes. So there you go.
Okay, let's talk about your real career now. Through university, where did you start out? Where was your grade role?
So I actually went to university to study to be a high school history and English teacher. My aspiration during high school was to be a marine biologist. At that stage, you had to do the degree up at James Cook in north of Queensland, and it was a fee-paying program. And as I touched on before, money was a bit tight when I was a kid, so I didn't have the money to go to university and probably wasn't bright enough to get a scholarship. But I had a bit of a look around, and I went to the University of New South Wales and started a double degree in arts and education with a view to becoming a high school history and English teacher. And I realised during that program that teaching wasn't for me. So I finished my arts degree and took up a management traineeship at Target.
Well, Target. Well, they're wonderful friends of ours. So tell us a bit about your time at Target. What did that teach you about you?
It taught me a couple of things. One, it taught me that I really enjoyed the retail environment. I enjoyed being part of a big team. Early on, I was given the opportunity to lead small teams, so sort of front-end supervision and sort of duty management weekends and nights. And I realised that was something I really enjoyed. I liked the opportunity of organising and coordinating and setting some direction and leading teams. So I really took a lot from that. I really liked the customer experience. I liked the opportunity to do things that made things better for customers, provide them with choice and options around product and service experience. And the business itself taught me a lot about resilience and flexibility because I worked in a number of different stores, both in metropolitan and regional New South Wales. And that gave me the opportunity to experience some really different lifestyles. So a lot of fun to be had, but got to a point in my career where my ambition, and I think probably the case for a lot of young leaders, you sort of get to a point where you think you've got it all boxed and know everything that there is to know. And I was keen to move on. And my impression of the business at that stage was you probably needed to have a few more years under your belt to progress. And being a little bit impatient, I started scouring around for something different and answered a job ad in the newspaper back in the days before online job recruitment and sent my resume away. And lo and behold, a few months later, I turned up on a management program at Westpac.
That's a big change, right? From retail to banking. How did you navigate that change?
It was really interesting because the bank was looking for people who had retail experience. It was probably that period where banks were moving from a very credit-driven process to a more sales and service-driven process. So they were really keen to understand what a retailer might have to offer. And I went into branch banking. And from branch banking, I went into HR. So in my early days in Target, I did some HR management in stores. So I had a bit of exposure to that. So I had a bit of an affiliation with the HR side of the business. And certainly, probably in all my career before I came to Bunnings, it was a fairly even split in years spent in operational roles versus years spent in HR roles. And moved through a couple of specialist HR functions in the bank, ended up as Chief of Staff for a divisional CEO, and then moved to Western Australia with my young family at the time into a senior management role in small business markets in Perth. And then ultimately across to Melbourne. So a bit of a nomad. So I learned lots of different things, lots of different experience. And I must admit, in terms of professional development, the bank provided as much, if not more, than most other employers and opportunity, but also lots of change, big organisation, lots of complexity, lots of cultural challenges. And I think you see that even today with some of the findings of things like banking royal commissions. Big organisations are challenging from a cultural point of view, no matter what industry sector. But it was fascinating and I learned a lot. I certainly learned a lot about financial management, financial disciplines and controls, a lot about strategic thinking and a lot about influencing change, because when you're in a role such as a HR function, you don't have direct leadership, but you have influencing responsibilities. And to me, it was a great opportunity to build those skills out.
It's a really interesting career journey from retail to finance, but then from branch and retail management into HR. And what's interesting, and I'm just going to compare this to some of the other CEOs I've had on the show, is that a lot of them have had this very broad experience across the business to give them a different insight into how to influence from non-direct leadership kind of roles, where you've got to influence in order to get a result. If someone really wants to get on the executive team, do you think this is an important thing for them to do? Is try and get that wide-ranging experience?
I certainly think it helps. There's no harm in it. And I've worked with hundreds of colleagues over the last couple of decades, and you see a variety of careers, some very linear and very technical, and some very broad-based. When people ask me about my career, I often refer to it as either a tapestry or a patchwork quilt, because there's lots of different bits to it. And I've sort of followed my curiosity and interest more so than sort of chasing a job title or the next promotion. And I think that in some ways, the generation that's entering the workforce are sort of seeing the value of diversity of thinking, diversity of experience. And it's certainly something that I've valued, and I'd encourage it in others. But I think everyone's career is up to them and where they want to take it. But the thing that I like about the variety of roles that I've had in my career is when I solve problems, I look at it through a range of different lenses. So I'll put a HR cap on, or a finance cap on, or an operational hat on, or a strategic hat on. And you'll often see how a problem can be solved from a number of different angles. Or you'll have a reference point somewhere in your career that you can use to guide other people to think about how they might solve a problem. So it's very different, but I think it has worked for me for sure.
Mm. Yeah, you're right. It's about what fits for you as an individual, right, and what's going to work. So we might have already answered this, but what do you think is your special sauce, so to speak, the thing that sets you apart from the competition in the corporate world as an executive?
I think it's probably, to be fair, it's probably for others to provide feedback, because it's always hard to score yourself. But I think that, coming to this role, it is a breadth of experience. It's certainly for Bunnings as an organisation, and I think the retail sector in general, I feel very passionate about it. I would classify myself as a retailer, as a professional retailer. And 5 years at the bank, I always remember it was sort of the back end of those 5 years. I was down in Burke Street, Christmas time, and you could see the sort of rush and hustle of Christmas trade and all the excitement. And in the banking industry, everyone was winding down, doing long lunches, thanking clients for their support throughout the year. And I'm wandering up and down Burke Street Mall, wishing that I was actually behind a till, enjoying the excitement that retail had. So the opportunity to go back to retail when I joined the Warehouse Group, and they'd acquired a business here in Australia, was one that I jumped at, because I went back to where I think my heart was. So I think doing something you're passionate about is really important, because life is really short, and if you don't do things that make you happy, then you're missing out. And happiness doesn't just have to be at home or with loved ones, it can be at work as well. And I also think that having grown up in the environment that I grew up, in the family environment and the support environment, when parents are away looking after one another when they're not well, meant that I've been very fortunate to stay grounded. And I've been very conscious through my life to have people in my life that A, want to be there, B, that I want to be there, that are very unfazed by what you do for a day job and keep you really grounded. And I think the danger for CEOs is to allow yourself to be surrounded by people who only want to tell you how good your ideas are, how funny your jokes are, what a great person you are. You actually need the balance of people that will go, you got that right, you got that wrong, you could have handled that in a different way. And those influences come from a range of different people. They're business mentors, they're the people you love, they're your kids, and they're your friends who know you outside of a job title and keep that sort of 2 feet firmly planted on the ground piece.
Are you particularly good at dad jokes?
I certainly laugh at all of my dad jokes. Most of my friends roll their eyes. I have a 20-year-old son and an almost 18-year-old son, and they're pretty quick to not only keep my feet on the ground, but also not laugh at any of my very poor dad jokes.
When I was we were about to have our first kids, our obstetrician said to me, the secret to dad jokes, he said, there's 2 rules, Greg: very small repertoire and constant repetition. And I'm practicing that. So
repetition is very important.
Very important.
You need to be very predictable.
Okay, what about moments of doubt? I mean, have you ever had these moments of doubt in your career? And if you have, what do you do about it?
Absolutely have moments of doubt. There's moments of doubt in will I take a role? The gamble in 1999, early 2000, when we made a decision to move with a 6-month-old son from one side of the country to another and away from all of our support networks to Perth, was a huge one. You doubt, are you doing the right thing for your family? Are you doing the right thing for your career? The decision to sort of leave banking to go back into retail, into a business that wasn't performing very well, we had the opportunity to help turn it around and do something different, coming out of something that was very certain. Moments of doubt, and moments of doubt around people, moments of doubt around business decisions, because at the end of the day, as a leader, the buck firmly stops with you, and particularly as a CEO, people talk about it being a lonely role. It can be, but that's really about being left to make a final decision around something that's really hard. And often that's a people decision. The decision to hire someone, the decision to let someone go, the decision to promote someone and backability, they're all things that require you to have values and beliefs that create a framework for you to make the decisions through, almost as a filtering system, to sort of self-validate and come up with decisions that you can reflect on and go, right or wrong, I believe I've made the decision that for my conscience is the best possible one.
Okay, this is I think is a very important point about how when you've got a tricky decision to make around people or even maybe strategy, almost within your own brain at an intuitive level, you're weighing this up against your own values. Now, do you make that explicit or is that implicit? Like, do you have actually got your values written down? You're saying, okay, I'm going to run this through this filter, or is it a little bit unconscious in the way you go about it?
We're really lucky in the business that we're in at Bunnings to have some very clearly laid out frameworks around what we would call our business model. We call it a leadership model, but it's actually a business model. I think everyone understands, Bunnings stands for its policy of lowest prices, its focus on widest range, and from an experience point of view, the notion of the best service that we can possibly deliver. We also have values that are related to that, so integrity and respect, which are all about building trust. We have a strong focus on teamwork. We have a strong focus on a winning offer and a winning culture, and a real desire to innovate. And between the two, so if strategy is doing things right, culture's doing the right thing, and there's a subtle difference between the two. Yes. But if you sort of balance those in your decision making, then those along with, and the reality is we're all getting older. The older you get, the more years under your career belt you've built up. You tend to have an instinctive reaction based on all the things you've seen go before and all those different roles that you might have held. Along with that sort of model allows you to sort of arrive at decisions that are really consistent. And I think for leaders in today's world, consistency is really important. It's not about predictability, but it's about balance and fairness. Being predictable is dangerous because you can be out competed by the market. You can be out competed even by colleagues across a business. But at the end of the day, what you want is a degree of sort of consistency, so people understand that as a leader, this is what you stand for, and this is what they're signing up to be led by you.
Hey, Chief, do you find the emails are pouring in and you just can't get in front of them? You've got all the social media things you've got to follow. You've got meeting after meeting and phone calls and text messages and probably WhatsApp, probably MS Teams as well. And Chief, there's just so many things to get done. Plus, there's all the challenges of being a family most likely. You've got kids to run around. You've got probably trying to be more fit and healthy. And you just try and work out how do you make it all happen. Well, Chief, we've got a short and powerful course for you called 7 Ways to Save an Hour a Day. The whole purpose is to help you be more effective with your time, to beat that overwhelm and get back in flow a lot more often. These are practical skills for anyone in a senior role. So Chief, check out chiefmaker.com/save an hour. That's a short course. It's only $49 and it'll be well worth your time and effort. I absolutely guarantee it's stacked full of practical tips. All right, Chief, check it out. chiefmaker.com/save an hour. Let's just imagine for a minute, someone's come to you, they are maybe battling in their career, maybe they're a bit stuck, maybe frustrated with where they are in their career. What advice would you give them in order to put some spark and some momentum back into their career?
I think the first thing is to listen really carefully and try and unpack what it is that's really going on. Is what's driving a person's career crossroads, if that's the example, a case of intrinsic or extrinsic motivators changing for them, what's going on outside of work. Because I think people often talk about work-life balance, and the more senior you get, and senior executives understand this, the less you can speak authentically to a work-life balance. But what I think you can achieve is an integrated life where you're doing things for your personal life during the workday and things for your workday during what traditionally would have been seen as personal time. If something's out of alignment or out of balance, whether it's your health, your family, your value set, what's going on at work, then it will have a knock-on effect to everything else. Being unhappy at work often gets taken home. Being unhappy at home often comes into work. So listening to someone's concerns is the most important thing, because that'll allow you to get some sense of where the root cause is. I think then really you're looking for empathy. So how can I relate to what's going on? What experiences can I share that allow that person to go, hey, this leader really gets where I'm coming from? And if I can't, how can I line that person up with someone who can support? Because I think some of the worst advice is when you just have no frame of reference. And again, one of the very few advantages to getting older is that you've often been through different experiences, loss of loved ones, challenges at home, challenges with kids, challenges with colleagues. They're often very difficult to sort of distill for someone who's starting their career versus someone who's maybe been in their career for 2, 3, 4 decades. So you find those reference points, and then you're really looking to sort of provide suggestions for people to think about and say, yes, I think this would work. I think equally important, having listened, sought to understand, show empathy, provide options for consideration, is a sensible check-in down the track, because real care is about not just in the moment, but it's following up and finding that person and sort of quietly taking them aside and saying, hey, look, you're confident to share this issue with me some days, some weeks, some months ago. I'm just checking in to make sure you're okay. That shows genuine care, first and foremostly, and it's not done by rote. It is done out of genuine care. But secondly, it is to make sure that if things are out of kilter, that they're back on track. And if they remain out of kilter, maybe there's more support that's needed, because it's a pretty stressful world out there. And we see from a workplace point of view more and more of our team comfortable to talk about emotional or psychological issues, and they often scar pretty deeply. So you want to be there to support as best you can.
Yeah, so that little model there is listen and seek to understand, the empathy piece, some options, some questions, a bit of guidance, and then the follow-up.
Yeah, and the follow-up is the really important part, because I think that sort of puts not a lid on it, but it just sort of makes sure that there is some traction and there is some direction, and I think again it just reinforces that you really do care for people.
Yeah, I can really sense that in you, Mike. Now, what about when you've gone to a leader or a mentor and they've given you some really hard feedback, maybe some stinging feedback, and the reason that it was hard was because you deep down knew it was to be true? Have you ever been in that situation?
I think we all have over time. I think early in your career, and leadership has changed. I entered the workforce and you called managers Mr. and Mrs. and it felt weird to be called a Mr. Because that's what I used to hear people refer to my dad as. So, and that's changed, and there's a much greater degree of informality in the workplace. But, certainly throughout my career, I've been very fortunate to have had people who've wanted me to be successful, and I've been able to sort of benefit from their care. But I remember, as I said, I joined Westpac Bank. I'd been there for some time and I'd had a really good run, a lot of things go my way, and I ended up as Chief of Staff for one of the divisional CEOs, and amazing role. What I didn't realise was that, this was a developmental role and this executive could see potential in me. I continued to sort of perform at the level I'd been performing at, and he sort of sat me down 2 or 3 months into the role and sort of pulled out 3 or 4 pieces of work and said, if you keep handing in work of this quality, then you won't work for me anymore. And that's a really confronting thing when you'd had a tailwind in your career, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you're getting this really abrupt feedback. And it does force you to think. And I think that the learning I've taken out is always be prepared and do the work. And I think if you're prepared to put in the effort and be prepared and be diligent in what you do, then it sets you up. But equally, there are times where in a cut and thrust of business, there will just be decisions made that with the benefit of hindsight you've made differently, and people will point those out. Sometimes people point them out in a coaching and constructive way, and sometimes it's more emotional. And as a leader, I've worked for some very strong personalities, and I've seen some behaviours as a leader that I would never want to replicate for someone else. As a human being, sometimes you do lose your patience and say things that with the benefit of hindsight you wouldn't, or said in a way that perhaps you wouldn't have said, and they have an impact. I think most importantly, you've got to have the willingness to go and say sorry if you get it wrong. And I know a lot of leaders that have a view that sorry is not in the vocabulary and you never admit defeat. But if you get it wrong, own it and apologise and move on and do your best to not. But for me, the most difficult feedback I'll ever receive is when someone says I've disappointed them. I think you can deal with anger, you can deal with frustration, you can deal with language that maybe isn't appropriate for a boardroom, but if someone sits you down and says you've let them down or you've disappointed them, then that's always going to be the hardest feedback, because I think we all set out to make people feel better about things, not.
Now you've got the 4 H's of authenticity, which are close to your heart. Let's just talk about those briefly if we can. The 4 H's are honest, humble, helpful and happy. And this is, I suppose, a bit of a guiding set of principles for you in the way you conduct yourself at work. Can you talk us through those 4? Maybe start with honest and humble.
Yeah, I might even go one step back if I can, which is sort of arrived at the 4 H's as a way of thinking about expressing who I am as a person, who I am as a leader, and also how it integrates into the culture of our organisation. So I touched earlier on our leadership model, and I was always looking for ways to convey points of view in a fairly simple way. I'm very privileged at Bunnings to lead a team of over 43,000 team members. The reality is that inside that team, it's as big as a large country town. We've got team members who can't read and write or can't read and write very well. We've got team members who don't speak English as a first language, and a whole myriad of ways that people take information. And I think it's John Eales, and I may be wrong when I quote it, but if you can make the complex simple and the simple compelling, then it's a really important communication tool. And I've found using really simple language a really important way to do that, not because it's dismissive, but it's more inclusive. So for me, the 4 H's were a very simple way of outlining what I stood for as a leader. And as I said, we're all human, so you get things right and you get things wrong. But, being honest is really important. People, as a leader, you need to have deep trust. People often create trust or respect in a job title before they even know a person, and leaders cast a really long shadow. And if you're going to say things that aren't true, consciously or unconsciously or deliberately, or even if it's a little white lie, then you have to own that. And I think being honest is a really simple premise because people know what they're getting. They may not like the feedback they're receiving, but if they know that it's coming from a good place or with good measure and it's honest, open and candid, then I think that's really important. And I think it builds trust. It builds trust with our parent business, it builds trust with our team, it builds trust with regulators. And honesty means admitting when you get it right and admitting when you get it wrong. And I think that's a really important thing in business. I think a lot of time, there'll be sort of weasel words, if you like, applied to sort of get out of sticky situations and represent things without accepting that you get things wrong. And, the thing we say constantly about the business and about ourselves as leaders is we're not perfect. We make mistakes every day. And one of the hardest things as a CEO to accept is that every single day, many of our stores, something's not going right. It may not be going right for a customer. It may not be going right with a product. It may not be going right for one of our team. We never set out for that to be the case. And we'll always seek to put it right as soon as we know about it. But if you can make a conscious choice to do things the right way, then honest really comes to life. Humble is a funny one, for me, because it's a little bit of me as a person and my upbringing. Fibre house and a Datsun 180B is a pretty straightforward way to start a life. And there's hundreds of thousands of other Australians and New Zealanders who've had an upbringing similar. So it's nothing special, but it's just who I am. But it also speaks to our brand. I love the fact that when people talk about Bunnings, they talk about their local Bunnings store. We are a large business. We're in a very competitive market. We have lots of different players out there that can sell products and services that we sell. So we recognise that our customers have a choice, and we want them to choose to drive to a Bunnings store or click on our website because they believe that our brand and our offer will do something for them that makes their home or their business a better place to be. And we're really proud of that, but we don't need to shout it from the mountains. We just need to double down on our efforts to do more. And I think from a leadership point of view, we work really hard to have a very low profile as executives in Bunnings. Partly it lets you live your life without reading about yourself in the newspaper or seeing yourself on a TV show. But equally, I think it's about letting the brand and the team do the talking. I'm really privileged to have the capabilities in our organisation that I have and to lead that team. And the real heroes in our business are the team that are pulling on a red shirt and tying on an apron every day and caring for our customers or moving stock around or in some factory in some part of the world, identifying great products to bring to life for our customers. They're the real heroes of our business. The rest of us get to play a supporting role in actually helping them do their job and make their job easy. And I think the second you start to believe your own press, you're in a world of trouble. And there's hundreds of case studies on that all around the world with CEOs. Yeah,
I noticed that this building we're in here is not called the head office, it's called the store support office. Is that quite deliberate?
It's very deliberate, and everything we do is to serve our customers. And it's people often ask what you do, and I like the term that one of my colleagues from Support Centre, who sadly passed away at the end of last year, talked about, which was our job's to sell more hammers. And we don't say that as a throwaway line, but the reality is that if you're not serving a customer in a store, then you're serving someone who is, and that's a mindset for our whole support team. And my job, and the job of every leader in Bunnings, is to actually make everyone else's job easier, not to make our own easier. So that often brings a bit of a toll on time and effort and time on the road, but that's how you actually run, a business that has a winning offer and keeps a team that's really engaged.
And that's the helpful part too, right? The next H being the helpful one of you being helpful to people that, that are really doing the hard work.
Absolutely. And, we talk about a service culture that's friendly and helpful. So I think one of the things I love hearing about when people talk about a business is the quality of the team and the willingness of our team to engage. And again, it comes with a caveat that we're not always perfect and we make mistakes and people have bad days and don't deliver the best service. But the way you often hear people talk about, care or helpfulness is, treat other people the way you want to be treated. And I think for me, that's always fallen a little bit short, because I think as human beings, we put up with things during the day. You put up with a grumpy partner or a grumpy boss or a grumpy teammate or a grumpy customer, and you absorb that because actually as human beings, we're designed to be compassionate and empathetic towards other people. I think the downfall of that is that sometimes we can be a bit grumpy ourselves. You kind of come from the mindset that, well, I put up with this nonsense sometimes, so maybe you can just in this instant. So the way I talk about it is treat other people the way you want your loved ones treated. So there's a whole lot of things that I'll put up with myself, but if it's someone that I care about or one of my kids, it's a very different lens, and the bar raises very, very quickly. So when I think about problems that a team member might bring to me or problems that a customer might bring to me, I sort of think about it. If they were one of my family members or they were someone I really cared about, what would I want the outcome to be? And you usually come up with a much better outcome than perhaps what you'd think about yourself. So that's where
that's a nice subtle change that really raises the bar, right?
It does.
I quite like that.
Yeah. So and the last one's happy, and that was a really interesting one. Over the last few years, both my parents passed away, and a heap of things change in your personal life. And what you realise is that no matter what your belief system and no matter what your faith may or may not be, the reality is the life you're living in the body you're living in, it will actually end one day. And we all want that to be as far off into the future as it can possibly be, with as much health and happiness on the way through. But in recognising that, you need to make the most, I believe, of every opportunity that you're given and be grateful for those. So you're grateful for the tough things that challenge you to be a stronger person, and actually live enough in the moment to value the things that mean the most, and to surround yourself with people that you want to be with and that want to be with you, and really actually get what you're trying to achieve. And that can be hard, because sometimes you end up with people in your life that mean the world to you, but maybe just aren't right for you in that particular point in time, or aren't you've moved to a different phase in your life. So I think you just need to not just live in the moment, because we all need to plan for the future, but certainly not dwell on the past too much, other than to maybe inform your thinking about decision making, but do things that actually create satisfaction and joy in your life. And I think you can find that in work, you can find it in sport, you can find it in almost any aspect of your life, particularly around family and friends. And have a good laugh and not take yourself too seriously. And I think that sort of, for me, allows me, when I connect and talk to the team about the 4 H's or talk more publicly as I am today about it, to sort of frame up what sort of makes me tick a little bit as a person and as a leader.
Yeah, I think this is a really important thing. I've spoken to quite a number of senior executives that have a little model like this. And as they've gone through their career, I think, like as you did, you finally codified it and got to the point, well, this is what I stand for. It's simple, I understand it. It means I can make decisions about my life and my career more easily. It's a really valuable process to go through, to somehow get it out of your head. It can be almost cathartic when you get to the end of it and go, oh, wow, that's what I stand for. Those are the pillars of who I am as an individual. So I think it's a great activity for anyone who aspires to be a senior executive or not. Go and do something like that. Spend a bit of time and work out what are the 3 or 4 or 5 things that make you tick.
I think we've been really fortunate. One of the things that we implemented about 11 years ago in Bunnings was a leadership development program called Authentic Leadership. And it's a process I've done inside Bunnings, and was fortunate enough at an external program to do a very similar activity. And you spend quite a lot of time focusing on the story of your life. So it's a little bit self-indulgent. You spend time reflecting on where you've got to. You spend time identifying people that have helped build your career out, and actually creates the opportunity to sort of express some gratitude to those people. And it's obviously nice to be able to reach out to someone from your past and say, hey, this is where I am today, and maybe wouldn't be there without you, so thank you very much. But it also helps you distill what your purpose is. And, I think leadership's about direction, and direction needs to have some purpose. If you're gonna drive somewhere on a weekend and just go for a drive, that's lovely. But if you're going on a holiday, then you want to know where you're going and perhaps why. And that purpose is really important. And I think out of that flows what's the framework that does support it. And what I've really enjoyed, as I've shared the 4H's a little bit more publicly, and some people might have seen it on a LinkedIn article that I published some time ago, is actually colleagues from years gone by who've commented and validated that that's actually the person that they saw. Because I think that sort of speaks to authenticity as well, is that, what you say, who you are is actually what you are or what you get when you deal with a person, because you meet a lot of people who have a public persona that's pretty amazing and pretty engaging, and up close it's a very different aspect, and that's cool because everyone's entitled to have a personal life and be private, but that disconnect sometimes can either surprise on the upside or surprise on the downside, and sometimes we wish you could see more of the upside, and sometimes perhaps you're a bit grateful that you don't. So there you go.
Right, now tell us a bit about your routines and prioritisation. We spoke a bit before about how it's hard in senior executive roles to keep work and life separate. You do a bit of personal stuff in the day and a bit of work at night. I think the most important thing for me is, how do you stay focused? There are so many people and so many priorities in your life. How do you simplify it and stay focused so you're clear in your head every single day?
It's a really hard one, because things that are urgent and not so important often shout louder than the things that are really important, and are either equally as urgent or a little bit more strategic. So I think having a very clear plan of how you want your own personal life to be looking and feeling over a period of time, and how you want a business to look and feel over a period of time, is really important. And again, that comes back to my previous comment about purpose and direction. So I think that is really, really important. The second piece is that I think I learned somewhere along the line in my career that my routine is no routine. And I'm a very organised person. I'm a Virgo star sign, so I'm not particularly big on astrology, but I seem to be pretty organised, and maybe that's my German ancestry as well. But I'm a pretty organised and disciplined person. And when I moved into my first senior executive role, what I realised is that actually there's no routine. Every day is different. And that's what really energises me now. I get out of bed and every single day I have a very different experience. And in the next, I think, 4 or 5 weeks, I'm in 5 different countries, and I'm doing things that are very detailed in some instances, and some of that are very strategic, and can be talking to our parent company board one moment or talking to our broader team at a conference another. And to me that really charges my batteries. I really like the diversity of what this role has, but it can be very disruptive. I think having a good degree of personal fitness and health is really important, which is something that, certainly in younger years I'd let go, because you become really focused on family time and kid time and work time, and often there's no me time. And I think personal growth and development as a leader is in part on you, in part on family, and in part on work. And most senior executives skip the you bit because you're just busy and you don't care for yourself the way that you should. But you need the fitness to actually do the job. There are some Fridays or Saturdays where you sort of wrap up your working week, and I feel as physically exhausted as when I used to play football up in Sydney a few years ago. So you sort of, it's almost a contact sport, leadership at points in time, and that physical fitness and resilience is important. Increasingly, sleep is the other one, and I think sleep has a big role to play in mental health, in physical health, and in organisational health, because when you're tired and you're jaded, you're more emotional, or I am at least, and perhaps your decision-making becomes a bit more short-term focused than it should be.
No, I can speak to that. I've got 3 kids under 3, and
that's hard work.
Right now we're focusing on quality sleep whenever we can get it. But I just want to talk about the physical fitness. You and I were talking prior to we started recording about the fact that you just did a half marathon on the weekend. But as we're talking about it, you spoke about how a half marathon is a congruent distance for you right now based on the demand for your time and energy. And while a full marathon isn't, can you just explain that? Because I think this is really important. You've got to pick a fitness regime that fits you in your life right now.
Yeah, I think if I go back a couple of years ago, I'd moved into the group CEO role at Bunnings and took on responsibility for our business in the UK. And I think in the 12 months that I led the business that we had in the UK, I went to the UK 13 or 14 times. And those that have done lots of trips to Europe or to the UK, it's 48 hours there and back in a steel tube, and you don't get those back anytime soon. And long travel, lots of hotels, not a lot of time. The weight goes on pretty quickly. It certainly does for me. I've only got to look at a carbohydrate and I put about 2 or 3 kilos on. But, a a colleague of mine and made the comment that I'd packed on a few kilos, and whenever you're tired and worn down, constructive feedback, no matter how it's given, often hurts a little bit. I sort of expressed my frustration to another friend of mine who turned around and, in a very compassionate way, said, well, what are you going to do about it? And there wasn't a lot of emotional support there. It was, well, you've got a problem and you need to deal with it. And the problem was actually just my own lack of discipline around caring for myself, and started walking a lot, started jogging a bit, went on a holiday, saw people running a marathon and thought, this is pretty cool, that's what I want to do. And a good friend of mine had just done the Melbourne Marathon. So that was where I set my goals for. And what I realised was that the time and effort and energy to run 42 kilometres is actually exponentially different to running half that distance. And I sort of joke a little bit about the fact that you cross the line for a half marathon, and if that was the halfway point, you'd be pretty despondent. But I don't think you can be unfit and run 20 Ks non-stop. So it does require a good degree of fitness. But what it means is that across a week I can run or walk or go to the gym 2 or 3 times, sort of an hour and a half, and maintain a level of fitness. It means that 3 or 4 times a year I can go out and run 20 odd Ks in a reasonably good time. I'm not going to set any world records, that's for sure, but do it in a way that pushes myself to be my best, but isn't taking a physical or social toll on me that means that I'd have even less time for the people that I love or care for in my life.
Yeah, you're not having to get up and run for 3 hours before work or something. You can.
Absolutely.
It's more manageable, right?
Absolutely. And I have enormous respect for people that do, and there are CEOs who do triathlons and do marathons, and I really respect them. But again, it comes back to knowing yourself and knowing your own limits.
Yeah.
And
I think the other thing that's important is putting in events, right, that you've got to train for, and you've got to turn up, and you've got to, that makes a big difference for you being motivated when you're 3, 4, 5 weeks out.
You've got to be accountable. And I think the other thing is that in life you need to have the right support framework around you. So, I've got a range of different people that I would call coaches and mentors. And I've been fortunate in my career to work for a number of leaders, from my first store manager in Target to my predecessor here at Bunnings, who you look up to and admire and respect. The good part is they're all human, just like me. So there's good bits and bad bits. And leadership and learning from other leaders is a bit like a smorgasbord. You actually learn what you want to be out of the leader you're working for, as well as you don't want to be. And I think being independent is important, because no one wants you to be version 2.0 of the person who came before you, including the person who came before you. They want to see you grow and be successful. So I'm enormously grateful. My opportunity is to pay the gifts that they've given me forward and give other people career opportunities. But you need other support framework in your life. So, I have a coach that helps me with some running. I have a coach that does a bit of work in the gym. I have, a good GP that I go and check up with every 6 months. I have a psychologist that I go and chat to every now and then, not because of anything other than I want to make sure that the mind and the body are working really well. And I think that in today's world, talking about issues around mental health and mental wellbeing are actually still a little bit nervy, particularly for people in senior roles. But I think the reality is we all have good days and bad days, and we all have doubts and self-doubts, and having the right support framework around you to be your best, whether it's running 20 Ks a little bit quicker than the last time you did it, or losing 2 or 3 kilos, or getting your blood pressure checked, or actually having someone talk about how things are feeling in your mind and soul is really important. And I think that creates a good sense of balance and calm as well.
I think the way you've reframed using a psychologist there is really important. And I've got a number of friends who are psychologists, and I can talk to them about anything. And the way that it needs to be treated is, instead of just thinking of a psychologist for a really pathological type condition like depression or anxiety, something that's really, really hard going, think about if you're 5 out of 10 psychologically healthy, how do you get to 10 and stay there? And the way to do it is to speak to professionals and get coaches and mentors all the time. Because if you're battling on the inside in your head, it's going to come through into all parts of your life.
And it's an emerging trend, I think, for all businesses. Certainly we've identified it at Bunnings. I think the statistic is, across the course of a lifetime, 1 in 4 Australians will be diagnosed with a temporary or permanent mental illness. We employ over 40,000 people. You can do the math on how many people may or may not be struggling at any given time just in our organisation. Making it an okay thing to talk about is important. Yeah. Asking for help is really important. And we all go through good times and bad times. The sort of 3 years that I've held this role, there's been some incredible highs and some incredibly tough times. And your traditional support network, which is, partners and kids is a fantastic base, but there's only so much that they can probably bear because they're dealing with things in their own life. Your colleagues have their own battles. So having someone that I sort of see as a coach for the mind and soul is a really good place to be. And I also think that as a leader, it's incumbent on me to actually talk openly about that, because in some way for my team and hopefully other teams, it creates a little bit of permission to actually go out and find someone to have a chat to. And it doesn't have to be, lying on a couch in a psychologist or psychiatrist's office. It can just be going for a walk around the block with someone you trust and having a bit of a download about how you're feeling and what's on your mind.
That's right. I run another podcast with a guy called Universal Man, and essentially it's men's mental health, or just men trying to be aspirational. Like, if you're only cruising along, how do you be, more aspirational? And just every fortnight, 10, 15 minutes, we talk about a particular issue. And I'll tell you what, the feedback on that is guys talking to guys about crossroad moments, challenging relationships, everyday stuff that can get you bogged down, but we don't want it to bog us down,
And I think, at the risk of stereotyping, men are pretty hopeless at talking about a lot of stuff. And I'm not sure what in society still drives us to be that way. Historically, there's probably stereotypes that sort of lock in, but you want, when you're building an organisation the way that we're trying to build Bunnings, which is somewhere that everyone feels welcome, you need to actually have an environment where everyone can speak their mind, men and women, older team members, younger team members, people that have got a heap going on in their life, people that are actually having the best time of their life. You actually need all that to sort of come together, and it starts with a willingness to talk. And as I said before, also a willingness to listen. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Righto, Chiefs. Now, more from Mike in a minute. Now, recently, I spoke to Carolyn Creswell, founder and managing director of Carmen's Kitchen. We spoke about how to hire, how to fire, have difficult conversations, how she's run a multinational business, in particular, her operating rhythm, and having a genuine work-life balance. Here's what Carolyn had to say about the two types of people with whom she works.
We have people here who are extremely good at their job, but have been doing the same job for a long time, and they have no career aspiration to work up the rank at all. And they're brilliant, and they're rock stars, and we love them. And we have people that come in and very quickly have career progression, and we can see that they are going to absolutely, be a superstar and have a much more senior role in a short amount of time. Neither one of those is a better. You have to respect both of them. Don't just focus on your superstars. Do respect your rock stars.
You can listen to that brilliant conversation with Carolyn by going to chiefmaker.com/346. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the podcast and check out all the other great interviews with our chiefs and gurus, as well as all the minisodes by going to chiefmaker.com/listen now. Righto, Chief. Let's get back to our best of series with Mike Schneider. Now listen, Mike, we're getting towards the end, so I'd like to ask you a set of questions that every chief answers. Are you ready?
Do my best.
Right. What is the number one book you would recommend for professionals or leaders of all types?
That's a really good question, because I've read so many different books over the years. I really loved Rick Charlesworth's book on coaching. I always found that really good, which is the sort of thesis in there is train harder than you're going to play, and I think that's all about preparation.
Rick was a great hockey coach of Australia, multiple gold medalling, amazing guy.
Yep, and a very patient Western Australian cricketer too. If you saw someone score runs as slowly as Rick ever did, it was amazing. But patience and resilience and real determination, and that came through very, very strongly. I recently read a very short book by Natasha Stott-Despoja, which is called On Violence, and I think it should be mandatory reading for every man in this country. And I think the relationship and the conversation we want to have as men around women and the role of women in our society is really important. And as a dad to two young men, that one has really defined me. Uncomfortable read, short read, but very uncomfortable as a guy to read it. But I think the thing for me is as leaders, how do we continue to challenge ourselves around the stereotypes that we apply to men and women, older workers and younger workers in the workplace. And as I said before, I want this to be a company that people feel safe and included in no matter what. So that one's actually been a real revelation to me. But I think throughout my leadership career, it's been books on leadership and about leaders. Read a couple on Sam Walton. As a retailer, you have to almost, but others on leaders like Jack Welch or Richard Branson. And again, it's a little bit of a smorgasbord. You go, I love this bit, and I hope never to be like that. And to me, that's what's really helped me a lot.
Yeah, I'll put the links to those books from Rick and Natasha on the website so people can check those out. What is the next thing in your life you're most excited about?
I'm really excited about the journey that we're taking Bunnings on. Bunnings Warehouse turns 25 this year, the big box format. We opened our first warehouse in August 1994 in the western suburbs of Melbourne. So
it's not that long ago, really, is it? When you think about it,
it's gone pretty quick. So it's a 130-plus-year-old business. Two brothers from England came out to WA and started a timber milling business, and here we are today. But I'm really excited about the next journey for the business. How do we continue to stay really relevant in the lives of every Australian and New Zealander that we serve and make their homes and small businesses better? How do we lean into what's changing on the technology front, both from products that we sell to customers, but the technology we use to run the business, connect and engage with our team, as well as serve our customers better, and also deepen the relationship we have with our B2B customer, our trade market. That's really exciting. And on the personal front, it's watching my two young men grow into even stronger and wiser, still young, but maybe one day middle-aged men with families of their own, and do things that make them really happy, and do things in my life with the people that I care about that, are going to continue to let me be the person that I want to be.
You have to teach them some good dad jokes one day, mate.
They've certainly got they can almost finish mine for me now. So
fantastic.
There you go.
Now, listen, every week I send out a newsletter with 3 dad jokes in it. Are you happy to contribute your favourite?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Now, can you nominate another CEO that you hold with great respect you think would be great for the podcast?
I've been really fortunate to work with lots of CEOs who I really, really admire over time. CEO who I actually admire more than most, and I don't know very well, so it's a little bit from afar, is Alan Joyce at Qantas.
Oh, yeah.
Purpose-driven, values-driven, customer-driven leader. So really impressive. So if you can convince Alan, I think we'd all learn a lot. So there you go.
We always just ask and see what happens. Okay, if you could lead any company in the world, it's not allowed to be Bunnings, right? Any company in the world, it's your choice. What would it be?
Wow, there's so many amazing businesses out there, and it is really hard because if I do all the things that I want to do, then hopefully this is the first and last CEO job that I hold, because I really love this business and feel very proud and very privileged to be given the opportunity to lead the team. But if I look globally, it's unsurprisingly going to stay in the retail space. Home Depot in the United States is an amazing business, and that'd probably be the one that I'd aspire to. But it's probably a little bit of a cheat because it's sort of in some ways Bunnings on steroids. So there you go.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Okay, what is a final message of wisdom and hope you think is vital for the next generation of executives?
If there's anything I've learned in my career, it's to take a chance on yourself. Say yes to opportunities that make you interested or that you're curious to know more about. Job titles and pay packets in the long run don't mean as much as you might think they are, particularly when you're starting out your career. So saying yes to those opportunities and most importantly, stay true to yourself. And you're going to find out more about yourself as you get a little bit older and you get a bit wiser perhaps, and you'll sort of work out what motivates you intrinsically and extrinsically. But yeah, be curious and take those chances, because if you do, then it's amazing where it can take you.
Mike Schneider, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Righto, Chiefs. That sums it up for this week. I just want to honour the awesome work that Mike has done over a long period of time now. When I met him in person at their office in Melbourne, those 4 H's were there in real life. He is a fantastic guy. He's helpful, he's authentic, and he just really was engaged in the process. What a superb chief. And in this day and age, leading a listed company is very difficult. He's done it very well for a long time now. So what an absolute legend. All the links and resources can be found at chiefmaker.com/347. And if you would like to stay in touch and hear all about some of the best resources you can find anywhere in the world to improve your performance at work, go to chiefmaker.com/subscribe. Now, Chief, if you're yet to rate the episode and subscribe, I hope you'll do so soon. It helps others see the magnificent value that the chiefs and gurus bring to their life and career. So make sure you hit subscribe on your podcast app now, give it a 5-star rating if you think it's worthy, and leave a short review about your favourite episode. Righto, Chiefs, as always, remember to stay epic.